That night began like any other ordinary evening, but destiny had other plans for me. I was driving my daughter to the airport for what she said was a short business trip. The city lights shimmered faintly across the windshield as I guided the car through the quiet Atlanta roads. My daughter Candace sat beside me, calmly checking her phone, while my 7-year-old grandson Devin sat in the back clutching his favorite dinosaur backpack. Everything appeared peaceful, yet I would soon learn that peace can sometimes be the mask of an approaching storm. We reached the terminal earlier than usual. The air conditioning inside the airport felt sharp against my thin sweater. Candace looked composed as always, a woman devoted to her career, confident and self-assured. "It'll only be 3 days, Mama," she said with her usual polite smile. "Take care of Devin and don't forget his medication." Her voice carried that managerial tone she used at work, measured, efficient, distant. Devin stood quietly beside me, his small hand wrapped around the strap of his backpack. He didn't say much, but he rarely did. Since his father's death 3 years ago, words had become rare for him. He communicated through eyes that seemed far too old for a child his age. Candace knelt in front of him, brushed his hair aside, and kissed his forehead. "Be good for Grandma, okay? I'll be back before you know it." Devin didn't reply. His silence felt heavier than the sound of departing planes echoing above us. I smiled faintly, trying to fill the moment with warmth. "We'll be fine, sweetheart. Just focus on your trip." She hugged me quickly, a brief embrace without the softness I used to feel when she was younger. Time and grief had built walls between us that words no longer crossed easily. When she finally turned toward the departure gates, I felt both pride and distance watching her walk away, her figure growing smaller with every step until she disappeared into the crowd. Devin and I lingered for a moment, surrounded by the hollow echo of rolling suitcases and fading announcements. "Let's go home." "Darling," I said softly, taking his hand. We walked together toward the parking garage. The silence between us was familiar, but that night it felt different, thicker, almost uneasy. I brushed it off, thinking he was just tired. But as we reached our car, something unexpected happened. Devin stopped. His little hand, which had been resting lightly in mine, suddenly tightened with surprising force. I turned around, startled. "What's wrong, honey?" His face had gone pale under the dim yellow light of the parking lamps. His eyes were wide, frightened, and full of something I couldn't quite name. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled so softly that I had to bend down to hear him. "Grandma, don't let us go back to the house." At first, I thought I had misheard him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. He gripped my wrist harder, his nails pressing into my skin. "Please believe me. I heard Mama talking this morning. She's planning something bad. She said we can't make any mistakes, that the gas has to look like an accident." My breath caught. The words felt unreal, like a bad dream spoken aloud. "Devin, what are you talking about?" "She was on the phone," he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "She said after we fall asleep, everything will be ready." "Please, Grandma!" "Don't go back. Please believe me this time." For a moment, my world went still. The cold air felt like knives against my skin. My heart wanted to reject his words completely. This was my daughter, my only child. She couldn't possibly be capable of something so monstrous. Yet one look at Devin's terrified face shattered every illusion I wanted to hold on to. I remembered the little things, the times he'd tried to warn me before. When he said he'd seen his mother hiding papers, or the night he told me she had been fixing the kitchen pipes long after midnight. I had always dismissed it as a child's imagination. Maybe I didn't want to see the truth. My hands trembled as I crouched down and cupped his face. "It's all right, baby," I whispered. "I believe you." Relief washed over his expression instantly, and in that moment, I knew with terrifying certainty that he was telling the truth. I opened the car door with shaking hands and helped him buckle his seatbelt. "We're not going home tonight," I said quietly. He nodded without another word, trusting me completely. I started the engine and drove into the night without any destination in mind. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark. But at least we were moving away. From the house, from the danger, from everything familiar. As the miles passed, my mind raced through a flood of memories. Candace's strange behavior over the past few months. The late-night phone calls, the locked office door, the financial papers she never let me see. It was all adding up now in ways that made my stomach twist. We stopped at a lonely gas station on the city's edge. I went inside for coffee while Devin slept in the back seat, his face peaceful but pale. I was barely holding it together when my phone rang. Candace's name lit up the screen. My pulse spiked. Her flight should have already left. Hello? I answered, forcing calm into my voice. Hey, Mama, she said smoothly. Where are you? You should have been home by now. The sound of her voice sent a chill down my spine. How did she know we weren't home yet? Oh, we decided to stop for dinner, I lied quickly. Devin was hungry. I see, she said after a pause that felt like a knife scraping against glass. Where are you eating? At that diner near the shopping center, I replied vaguely. Shouldn't you be on the plane? There was a delay. My flight's rescheduled for tomorrow morning, she said almost too fast. I'm heading back home now. I froze. Something inside me screamed that she was lying. Candace never left anything to chance. She'd been planning this trip for weeks. A reschedule? At midnight? Impossible. That's too bad, I murmured, my hand shaking slightly. We'll see you later then. Yes, she said sweetly, her tone suddenly colder beneath the surface. Take your time, Mama, drive safe. The call ended, and I stared at my reflection in the car window. Her calm voice, her casual tone, none of it fit the woman I thought I knew. She was checking if we were still alive. Devin stirred in the back seat and blinked awake. Was that Mama? He asked quietly. I nodded. She said the flight was canceled. She's coming back home. His eyes filled with fear again. She knows, Grandma. She knows we found out. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The night outside felt heavier, the silence louder. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how far this nightmare would reach, but one thing was certain, we couldn't go back. The city faded behind us, its lights shrinking in the distance like dying embers. The hum of the car engine was the only sound that broke the silence. Devin had drifted off again, his little head resting against the window, clutching his backpack as though it could protect him. I drove aimlessly through the sleeping streets, unsure where to go. Every road seemed both a refuge and a risk. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I couldn't stop hearing his trembling voice from earlier, those few words that had shattered everything I thought I knew. My daughter, Candace, had always been strong, proud, and independent. She had built a career out of ambition and discipline. But beneath that polished surface, what else had been growing that I refused to see? After Reggie's death, I had pitied her. Losing a husband is hard at any age, but for Candace, it seemed to unravel something deep inside. She buried herself in work, spent long nights locked in the office, and grew distant even from her own son. I used to think it was grief, but grief doesn't whisper murder through a phone line. I took a turn onto an empty highway leading out of Atlanta. The night air pressed cold against the windshield. Every sign, every flicker of headlights in the mirror made my heart skip. Was someone following us? I kept checking, but the road stayed empty. After about an hour, I spotted a lonely gas station glowing like a small island in the dark. I stopped, needing a moment to breathe. Devin was still sleeping, his face peaceful but pale. I covered him with my shawl, then stepped outside. The air was sharp and smelled faintly of fuel. Inside the small convenience store, the clerk gave me a polite nod. I bought a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt water, but I needed it. My thoughts were spiraling, each one darker than the last. If Candace truly wanted us dead, she wouldn't stop just because we had fled. I had no doubt that right now she was trying to find out where we were. When I stepped back into the car, my phone began to vibrate in my pocket. The screen glowed with her name. For a second, I froze. My instinct screamed to ignore it, but curiosity won. I answered, "Hey, Mama," Candace said softly, her voice deceptively calm. "Where are you?" You should have been home by now. My pulse quickened. Oh, we stopped for dinner, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Devin was hungry. Dinner? She repeated slowly. Where? At that diner near the mall, I lied. Shouldn't you be on the plane by now? There was a delay, she replied too quickly. They rescheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm heading back home now. The words hit me like ice. Her tone was wrong, too smooth, too measured. Candace was meticulous. She never left room for uncertainty. A rescheduled flight at midnight? No. She was testing me, trying to see if we were still at the house. That's too bad, I said quietly. We'll see you when you get back. Sure, Mama, she replied, her voice suddenly sweet again. Drive safe. Give Devin a kiss for me. When the call ended, I sat motionless for a few seconds, the phone still pressed to my ear. I knew then with absolute certainty she hadn't gone anywhere near that airport. I looked at Devin in the rearview mirror. He was awake now, watching me with those sharp, knowing eyes. Was that Mama? He asked softly. I nodded. She said the flight was canceled. She's coming home. Devin's face drained of color. She knows, Grandma. She knows we found out. Those words sank into my chest like stones. I forced myself to stay calm. It's going to be okay, I said, though even I didn't believe it. We just need to think. I drove aimlessly again, trying to gather my thoughts. Going to a hotel wasn't safe. Candace could trace my card. Going to a friend's house was even worse. She could call or show up pretending nothing was wrong. We needed to disappear, at least for the night. Devin's small voice broke the silence. Where are we going, Grandma? Somewhere safe, I said, though I had no idea where that was. We'll figure it out. His trust in me was absolute, and that made my chest ache. He deserved safety, not fear. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, determined not to fail him. Then I remembered someone, Wallace Harrison, the doorman from our old apartment building. A kind man who had known our family for decades. He'd been there through every high and low, even at Reggie's funeral. He was retired now, but he lived in a small staff apartment behind the building. Discreet, unnoticed, safe. That was where we would go. I turned the car toward our old neighborhood, praying he was still working the night shift. By the time we reached the old apartment complex, the clock on the dashboard showed 1:20 a.m. The streets were empty, the building quiet except for a few flickering lights near the entrance. I parked a block away to stay out of sight. Stay here for just a moment. Sweetie, I whispered to Devin. Grandma needs to check something. He nodded. Clutching his backpack tighter, I stepped out of the car, keeping to the shadows as I approached the security booth. Inside, under the dull yellow light, I saw Wallace reading a crossword magazine. When I tapped on the glass, he looked up, confused at first, then surprised. Mara? He said, stepping out of the booth. What on earth are you doing here at this hour? Wallace, I whispered urgently, glancing around. I need your help. Please, it's serious. Within minutes, we were inside his small apartment tucked behind the building. Devin sat quietly at the kitchen table while Wallace listened in stunned silence as I explained everything. Candace's strange behavior, Devin's warning, and the terrifying call from the gas station. When I finished, Wallace rubbed his chin and looked at me gravely. Mara, this is a serious accusation. Are you sure? I wish I weren't, I said, my voice breaking. But my grandson's terror was real. And I can't ignore it anymore. Wallace nodded slowly. What do you plan to do? I need to go back to the house, I said finally. Devin's head shot up. Not to stay. Just to find proof. If we go to the police now, they won't believe us. We need evidence. No, Grandma, Devin pleaded, his eyes filling with tears. It's dangerous. She might come back. I took his cold little hands in mine. I'll be careful, sweetheart. I promise. But we need something solid, Wallace frowned. You can't go alone. I have to, I replied quietly. If she suspects anything, she'll destroy whatever evidence she has. After a long pause, Wallace sighed. Then I'm coming with you. I'll wait in the car. If you're not out in 20 minutes, I'm calling the police. It wasn't ideal, but I agreed. Devin was left under his care, though not without tears and promises. "I'll be back soon," I whispered, hugging him tightly. By the time Wallace and I left, the city had gone completely silent, the kind of silence that hides danger beneath its stillness. As we approached my house, its dark outline appeared against the night sky like something out of a nightmare. My heart pounded as Wallace turned off the car engine. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I have to be," I whispered, staring at the house that once felt like home. "I need to know the truth." The wind was colder than I expected when I stepped out of Wallace's car. The street was still, the kind of stillness that feels unnatural, as if the air itself were holding its breath. My old house stood a few yards away, its windows completely dark. It should have looked familiar. After all, I had lived there for years. But at that moment, it felt like a stranger's home, hollow and watching. I turned to Wallace, who sat gripping the steering wheel. His expression carried quiet worry. "Remember," he whispered, "you've got 20 minutes. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling the police." I nodded, trying to steady my trembling hands. "I'll be quick. Keep your phone ready." Taking a deep breath, I walked through the backyard, keeping close to the shadows. My heart hammered in my chest. Every step sounded louder than it should have, even though I was moving as lightly as my 70-year-old body allowed. When I reached the kitchen door, I pulled out my key. To my surprise, it turned easily. The lock hadn't been changed. I slipped inside and shut the door gently behind me. The kitchen was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. The air felt colder than usual, and a faint chemical smell hung in the air. It wasn't gas, but it made my throat tighten. I took out the small flashlight I had borrowed from Wallace and swept the beam across the room. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The dishes, the mail on the counter, even my reading glasses beside the fruit bowl. But there was no comfort in familiarity anymore. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every silence carried meaning. I moved carefully through the hallway toward the stairs. My goal was clear: find Candace's office. If she was planning something, her secrets would be hidden there. The climb up the staircase felt endless. The boards creaked beneath my feet, each sound slicing through the silence. When I reached the landing, that same chemical scent grew stronger. My flashlight flickered slightly as I passed the closed doors leading to the bedrooms. Then I stopped in front of her office. It was locked, of course. I had expected that. Years ago, when Candace was a teenager, she used to lock herself in her room after arguments. Back then, I'd learned how to open a simple door lock using a hairpin, a mother's small trick. I never thought that one day I'd use that skill to uncover something that could destroy my family. I pulled a pin from my hair, bent it slightly, and inserted it into the keyhole. My fingers trembled as I worked. A few tense seconds passed, and then I heard the faint click of the lock releasing. I pushed the door open slowly, praying the hinges wouldn't betray me. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing an immaculate office. Everything was in its place. Books on management lined the shelves, a laptop sat on the desk, and neat stacks of folders waited to be filed. It was the kind of order Candace loved, but to me it felt rehearsed, staged. I closed the door behind me and began searching. The laptop was password protected, so I moved to the drawers. The first few held nothing but stationery and office supplies. In the third drawer, beneath a pile of company paperwork, something red caught my eye. A folder, hidden just enough to make me suspicious. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. What I saw made my stomach turn. Inside were bank documents I'd never seen before, accounts under names I didn't recognize, large money transfers, and a copy of my life insurance policy, marked with handwritten notes in the margins. Notes about payout amounts, clauses, and even the word confirmation, circled twice. And there, near the bottom of one page, was a name scribbled in the corner: M. Sellers. My blood ran cold. I remembered hearing that same name earlier that night, when Devin told me what he'd overheard. His mother saying something about making sure Marcus handled the details. It wasn't imagination. He'd been right all along. Before I could process what that meant, a faint sound downstairs froze me in place. The front door had opened. I held my breath. The sound was unmistakable. The click of a door latch followed by slow footsteps on the wooden floor below. My mind screamed that it was impossible, but my instinct said otherwise. Candace was back. I turned off my flashlight and stood perfectly still. For a few seconds, the only sound was my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving through the hallway below, slow and deliberate, as though someone was checking each room. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Wallace's number. 2 rings, then I hung up. It was our code for trouble. Then I pointed my flashlight at the red folder and quickly snapped photos of every document I could. The light from the phone illuminated the papers for only seconds, but it felt like minutes. I placed everything back exactly as I found it and moved to the corner of the room, hiding behind the door. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I could hear faint breathing now. Someone was standing just outside the office. The doorknob turned slowly. The door creaked open a few inches, and a shadow appeared on the floor. It wasn't Candace's silhouette. It was taller, broader. "A man, Marcus," a voice called softly from downstairs. It was Candace. "My daughter. Is everything clear up there?" "Just checking," the man replied in a deep voice. "House looks empty." I clutched the flashlight like a weapon, praying they wouldn't come inside. "They should be here," Candace said, irritation in her tone. "The plan was for tomorrow night after my flight. Now everything's ruined." "I told you this would happen," Marcus muttered. "You can't predict kids." "Maybe the boy heard something." "Impossible," she snapped. "Devin never wakes up before 7. And even if he did, who would believe him?" My heart ached hearing those words, my daughter's cold confidence dismissing her own child's voice. A sudden noise downstairs, a thud, then a muffled groan cut through the air. "What was that?" Candace hissed. "I'll check," Marcus said, moving toward the stairs. "You keep working on her room." "Her room." "My room." They were setting the scene for an accident. Every part of me wanted to run, but I knew Wallace must have come in after my signal. If that noise was him, he was in danger because of me. I had only one escape route, the window. It opened onto a narrow ledge that overlooked the backyard. The fall was 20 feet at least. Dangerous for anyone, worse for me, but it was the only chance I had. I unlatched the window and pushed it open slowly. The cold night air rushed in. My legs trembled as I climbed onto the ledge, gripping the wall for balance. Below, the yard looked darker than ever, but I could see the faint outline of the old ivy-covered trellis. Then I heard Candace's voice again, sharper this time. "Marcus, there's someone else here." "Find them," I moved faster. The ivy scratched my hands as I climbed down, my old joints screaming in protest. Behind me, I heard a shout. Marcus had found Wallace. My heart tore apart as I heard his voice, pained but defiant. "Leave her alone!" Then a dull thud followed by silence. I reached the ground, my legs shaking, pain shooting through my hip. There was no time to think. I stumbled toward the low wall at the back of the yard, forcing myself over it just as a flashlight beam swept across the grass behind me. I landed hard on the other side. Breathless, heart racing, for the first time that night, I realized how close death had come, how close Candace had come to succeeding. I limped through the neighboring yard, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. There was only one thing left to do. I had to call the police. The pavement was cold beneath my feet as I stumbled into the nearest streetlight's faint glow. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my hands trembled so violently I could barely keep hold of the phone. Wallace's face flashed in my mind, his kind eyes, his promise to wait. The thud I'd heard in the house echoed again in my head. I prayed he was still alive. I dialed 911. The moment the line connected, my voice came out broken and breathless. This is Ara Benham. I need help. My daughter is trying to kill me and my grandson. She has someone with her. Please, she's in our house right now." The dispatcher's calm voice steadied me a little. "Ma'am, where are you calling from?" I glanced around at the street signs, disoriented. "I'm on Magnolia Lane near the 200 block. Please, you have to hurry. There's a man with her. He's dangerous. And my friend Wallace Harrison, he's inside." "We're sending officers now," the dispatcher said quickly. "Stay where you are if you can." "Do you have proof of what you're saying?" "Yes," I said, fumbling for my phone's gallery. "I have photos, documents she kept about my life insurance, notes about a staged gas leak, transfers to a man named Marcus Sellers." "Stay on the line with me," the dispatcher said. "Help is on the way." In the distance, faint sirens began to grow louder. My knees weakened with relief, but I forced myself to stay alert. When the patrol car finally arrived, I waved frantically. 2 officers stepped out, flashlights cutting through the dark. The older one approached with cautious calm. "Ma'am, are you the one who called?" "Yes," I managed, showing them the photos. "She's in there with a man named Marcus. They're planning to make my death look like an accident. Please, my friend is inside." They exchanged quick looks, then spoke into their radios. "We'll get him out," the younger officer said. "Stay in the car for your safety." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion hit me all at once. They guided me to the patrol car, and I sat trembling as backup arrived, 2 more vehicles pulling quietly to the curb. The officers moved with precision, surrounding my house from all sides. Moments later, the quiet night exploded into chaos. A shout, then the crash of breaking glass. Another shout followed by heavy footsteps and the sharp crack of a gunshot. My whole body flinched. I pressed my hands to my mouth, praying for Wallace. Minutes felt like hours until the front door burst open. 2 officers helped Wallace out, limping and bloodied but alive. I cried out his name as they brought him toward the car. He gave a weak smile. "Told you I'd call the police if you took too long." Tears streamed down my face as I helped him sit. "You brave fool," I whispered. The relief lasted only seconds before 2 officers emerged, dragging a man in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I knew it was Marcus, the man who had prowled my house just minutes earlier. His face was hard, his jaw set in defiance, but there was no sign of Candace. One of the officers came to my window. "The house is secure, ma'am, but your daughter's gone. She must have escaped through the back before we arrived." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Then she's still out there," I said softly. "We'll find her," the officer assured me. "Right now, we need to get you and your grandson somewhere safe." "Where is he?" "At a friend's apartment," I said quickly. "The old doorman from our old building. I left Devin there." "Then that's where we go next," he said firmly. "If she's trying to finish what she started, she might go looking for him." I didn't need any more convincing. The moment they secured Marcus in one of the cars, I climbed into the back seat of another patrol vehicle. Wallace, still pale and bleeding slightly, insisted on coming too. "She's dangerous," he said through clenched teeth. "You shouldn't face this alone." The drive to the old neighborhood felt endless. My thoughts raced faster than the siren outside. Candace knew every part of my life, every friend, every place I'd ever gone when I was frightened or uncertain. It wouldn't take her long to guess where I might have gone for help. The car screeched to a stop near the old building. Even before the officers stepped out, I saw it. The staff door was slightly open. "Stay here," the officer warned, but I didn't listen. My heart was already pounding too loud for reason. I stumbled out of the car and ran toward the small apartment, shouting my grandson's name. "Devin!" The door was locked. The officer tried the handle, then rammed it once with his shoulder. It burst open with a splintering crack. The lights inside were off. I rushed in behind him, my voice breaking. "Devin?" "Sweetheart, it's Grandma." Silence. Then my eyes caught something on the sofa bed, a small piece of torn paper under an empty mug. I picked it up with shaking hands and read the words scrawled in my grandson's uneven handwriting. "Mama found me. She said she needs to protect me from you, that you're sick and making up stories." "I'm scared, Grandma. Help." My body went cold. The note slipped from my fingers. Wallace caught me before I collapsed. "She took him," I whispered, numb. "Candace took him." The officer was already on his radio, calling for immediate assistance. Within minutes, a full-scale alert was issued. A child abduction case. They gathered descriptions, vehicle details, and every lead I could give, but deep down, I knew how careful Candace was. She wouldn't use her own car. She'd planned everything down to the last detail. Back at the precinct, the hours passed in a blur. I gave my full statement, showed every photo I had taken, and answered every question about Candace's behavior. The sergeant in charge, a tall man with tired eyes, listened intently. "Ma'am," he said after a while, "the accomplice we arrested is cooperating. He's confirming parts of your story. Says your daughter hired him to stage a gas leak. He claims she promised him a share of the life insurance payout." I felt sick. "And Devin?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Nothing yet," he admitted, "but we're tracing every highway and checking for stolen or rented vehicles." She won't get far. But Candace wasn't just any criminal, she was my daughter. She knew how to think ahead, how to cover her tracks, how to sound perfectly sane while the world burned around her. I sat in the waiting area beside Wallace, who had a bandage wrapped around his head. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., each minute heavier than the last. Finally, Wallace spoke softly. "We'll find him, Ara. Devin's a smart boy. He'll find a way to leave us a sign." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But as I looked out the window at the dark horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping through our fingers, and with every passing hour, the danger was growing. Then, like a spark of memory, something came to me. Something Devin had mentioned weeks ago. He'd told me that his mother had taken him to see a new place in the countryside, a special house near a lake. At the time, I thought it was just one of her work trips, but now I realized it might be something else entirely. I turned to the sergeant. "I think I know where she might have gone." The moment I spoke those words, the sergeant leaned forward. "You think she's at a property near a lake? Tell me everything you remember." I took a deep breath, trying to recall the details. A few weeks ago, Devin mentioned that Candace took him on a drive. He said it was a surprise trip to a quiet house with a big yard and a lake behind it. He told me there were animals nearby, maybe horses or cows, and that Mama said it might be their special place someday. The sergeant nodded, taking notes. "Did he mention a town name?" I frowned, searching my memory. "Something with wood in it. Maybe Riverwood? Or Cedar Ridge?" He wasn't sure. "It was somewhere west of Atlanta." "That's all I know." "All right," the sergeant said, standing. "We'll start with every property in those areas purchased or rented recently under her name, or anyone connected to her." It's a start. Officers began working immediately, phones ringing, keyboards clattering. I sat quietly beside Wallace, who was now sipping coffee, his expression grim. "She's clever," he said softly. "She'll try to make this look like she's saving him, not taking him." He was right. Candace always knew how to twist the truth to suit her. I remembered her as a teenager. Charming, persuasive, always the one teachers adored because she could make every lie sound reasonable. I had loved that confidence in her once. Now it terrified me. Hours passed. Dawn was still a gray smudge behind the windows when an officer rushed in with a file. "Sergeant, we found something. A property recently rented in the name of M. Sellers near Highway 142. The location matches the description, a lakeside ranch called Riverwood." My pulse quickened. That name, Riverwood, it fit perfectly. The sergeant turned to me. "That's our lead. We'll move immediately." Before we left, another officer entered the room holding my phone. "Ma'am, this was ringing." "Unknown number." I took it, confused, and answered. "Hello?" A small, trembling voice replied. "Grandma? Devin!" My heart nearly stopped. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" "I'm okay," he whispered. "Mama's sleeping. I found her phone and used it to call you." The room fell silent as every officer leaned closer. The sergeant motioned for one of the techs to trace the call. "You're so brave, my love," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Can you tell me where you are?" "It's a big house, Grandma," he said softly. "There's a lake outside and I can see trees everywhere. We came here at night. I think it's far away. Do you see any sign? Anything written anywhere? I asked gently. He hesitated. There's a mailbox outside that says Riverwood Ranch, Highway 142. Tears of relief filled my eyes. That's perfect, Devin. You did so well. Is Mama sick, Grandma? His voice cracked. She keeps saying you want to hurt us. She looks different. She's not well, sweetheart, I said, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. Listen to me carefully, okay? Find a safe place to hide. Maybe the barn or somewhere quiet. Don't make any noise. The police are on their way? Okay, he whispered. There's a barn behind the house. I'll go there. I love you. I love you too, my brave boy, I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. Stay hidden. Help is coming. Just as I was about to say more, his voice lowered to a whisper. She's waking up. I have to hang up. The line went dead. The sergeant didn't waste a second. We've got the trace. We're moving, he turned to me. You'll ride with us, but you'll stay in the car when we arrive. Understood? I nodded, though in my heart I knew I wouldn't be able to just sit and wait. The convoy of patrol cars sped westward. The sky was beginning to lighten, streaks of pale gold cutting through the gray. Wallace sat beside me in the back seat, silent but alert. Mara, he said quietly, she's unraveling. If she's cornered, she might do something desperate. I nodded, staring out the window. She already has. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. I tried to focus on the rhythm of the tires against the asphalt, but my thoughts kept circling back to Devin's voice. He was so calm, so steady despite the danger around him. He had saved us once. Now it was my turn to save him. After 2 hours, we turned onto a dirt road lined with trees. The sign at the corner read exactly what we hoped: Riverwood Ranch. The convoy stopped before the property. The sergeant gave quiet orders. We go in silently. She might be armed. Keep your distance until I give the signal. He turned to me. You wait here. No exceptions. I nodded again, though my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. Through the trees, I caught a glimpse of the house. 2 stories, wooden siding, a wide porch overlooking the still water of the lake. The sun was climbing higher now, but the beauty of the scene only made the fear in my chest more unbearable. The officers spread out, moving through the trees toward the house. I watched them disappear one by one. Wallace sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the road. Minutes dragged like hours. Then came a sound that shattered the quiet, an echoing gunshot. My heart stopped. No, I whispered. Before anyone could stop me, I pushed open the car door and ran down the dirt road. Wallace shouted behind me, but I didn't hear him. My only thought was of Devin, my little boy who had already seen too much darkness. As the house came into view, the scene unfolded in chaos. Officers shouted from cover, their weapons raised. On the porch, standing in the morning light, was Candace, her hair disheveled, her face pale, her eyes wild. And clutched tightly in her arm was Devin. My breath caught. She was holding a gun. Stay back. She screamed, pressing the weapon close to her side while keeping Devin in front of her. Don't come any closer or I'll shoot. The sergeant raised his voice, calm and firm. Candace, put the gun down. Let the boy go. We can talk about this. You don't understand, she cried. She's lying. My mother is lying. She wants to take everything from me. Her voice cracked. The desperation in it was chilling, but what hurt most was seeing the fear in Devin's eyes, silent tears glistening as he looked toward me. I stood behind the patrol car, frozen. Every instinct in me screamed to run to him, to pull him away, but one wrong move could end everything. Candace, the sergeant said again, softer this time. It doesn't have to end this way. But Candace's grip on the gun tightened. You have no idea what she's done. She took my life, my freedom, my money. That insurance was mine. My father left it for me. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stepped out from behind the car, ignoring Wallace's horrified whisper. Candace! I called, my voice trembling. Her head snapped toward me. You, she hissed. You should be dead. For a moment, the world fell silent. Even the birds had stopped singing. The only sounds were the faint rustle of leaves and the erratic breathing of the woman standing before me, my daughter. Candace's eyes darted between me, the police, and the trembling child pressed against her side. Her hand shook slightly, the gun glinting in the rising sunlight. "Candace," I said softly, my voice trembling, but steady enough to hold her attention. "You don't have to do this." She laughed, a sharp, broken sound that didn't belong to the daughter I once knew. "Don't have to? Mama, you've already done everything. You took my choices, my freedom, my money. You've controlled me my entire life." "I never controlled you," I replied gently, taking a small step forward. "I only wanted to help you, to protect you." "Protect me?" She snapped. "From what? From living my own life? From the mistakes you thought I'd make?" Devin's small voice broke through the tension. "Mama, please stop," he whispered. His voice cracked, but his eyes were clear, so much like Reggie's, filled with that quiet strength. Candace's arm tightened around him. "Stay quiet," she hissed, then turned back toward me. "You see, even he listens to you more than me. You made me invisible in my own home." Every word she spoke was dripping with years of resentment I had never seen clearly. The grief from losing her husband had twisted into something cruel, something darker than pain. The sergeant, standing behind the patrol car, spoke in a calm, steady tone. "Candace, no one here wants to hurt you. Let your son go and we can talk about everything. You're surrounded. There's no way out of this except safely." "Safely?" She scoffed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "There's no safe for me anymore." "You don't understand." I took another cautious step forward. "I do, Candace. I understand more than you think." "Stop moving," she screamed, the gun rising higher. I froze, hands slightly raised. "All right, I'm stopping. But you have to listen to me now, baby. Please." For a second, her eyes flickered. The word baby seemed to strike something deep. Behind her, the lake shimmered under the sun, calm and still, mocking the storm that was tearing my family apart. "Do you remember?" I said softly. "When you were little and you wanted to run away because you thought I didn't love you enough? You were 9. You packed a pink lunchbox and hid behind the neighbor's shed." Candace's jaw trembled. "Don't." "I searched for hours," I continued, my voice thick with tears. "When I found you, you said you wanted to go live with another family because they let their daughter eat dessert first. You cried for an hour when I told you I'd miss you. You begged me to promise I'd never stop looking for you." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "I never stopped, Candace, not then. Not now." Something flickered across her face, a memory, a hesitation. The gun wavered, but just as quickly her eyes hardened again. "You're lying," she said through clenched teeth. "You only care about control. You couldn't even let me have the insurance money." "It wasn't mine to give," I replied gently. "It was Reggie's wish. He wanted you to have stability, not poison. He wanted his son safe." "So did I," her lips quivered. "You think I wanted to hurt him? You think I wanted this life?" "No," I said softly. "I think you're lost. And I think you let the wrong person convince you there was no way out. Marcus used you, Candace. He never cared about you. Don't talk about him," she screamed, her hand jerking upward. The officers behind the cars tensed, but the sergeant motioned them to hold their fire. Candace's breathing grew ragged. "You made me this way. You turned me into someone who can't stand to be weak." I shook my head slowly. "You're not weak, my child. You're in pain. But what you're doing now, it isn't strength. It's destruction." Devin stirred, and I saw something shift in his face, an understanding. His little body tensed as if he was planning something. I caught his eye and gave the smallest nod, silently telling him to wait. Candace's attention flicked between me and the sergeant. Her finger trembled dangerously close to the trigger. "Listen to me, Candace," I said, lowering my voice to almost a whisper. "No amount of money will fix the emptiness inside you. But letting go, choosing to stop this now, might save what's left of you. For one fleeting moment, I saw the daughter I remembered, the girl with bright eyes who once made paper hearts for Valentine's Day and promised to take care of me when I got old. That girl was still in there somewhere, buried beneath all the bitterness. Her lower lip trembled. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said quietly. "Then end it now," I urged softly. "End it before it's too late." Devin suddenly twisted his head and sank his teeth into her arm. Candace shrieked in pain and the gun fired, the shot splitting the morning air. Screams followed. Officers surged forward. I ran toward the porch as the weapon clattered to the ground. Devin tumbled to the floor, rolling to safety behind the railing. Two officers grabbed Candace, forcing her arms behind her back as she struggled and screamed. I fell to my knees beside my grandson, clutching him so tightly I could feel his heartbeat racing against mine. "You're safe," I whispered, my tears falling into his hair. "You're safe now, my brave boy," he clung to me, trembling. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean to." "You saved us," I said, cutting him off. "You saved everyone." As the officers led Candace toward the patrol car, she looked back at me. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, but her eyes, those once warm eyes, were hollow now. I didn't see hatred in them anymore, only exhaustion. When she passed by, I whispered, "I love you, Candace. No matter what happens, I love you." For the first time that morning, she didn't respond. She simply looked away. The sergeant came over, kneeling beside me. "He's safe," he said quietly. "We've got her. It's over." But I knew it wasn't really over. Not for me. Not for Devin. Not for any of us. The sun had risen completely now, casting golden light across the lake. It should have felt peaceful, but all I could think of was how thin the line was between love and destruction, and how easily a heart can lose its way. As the patrol cars pulled away, I held Devin close, whispering a silent promise that I would never let him face the darkness alone again. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars flickered across the lake's surface like ghosts refusing to rest. I stood there for a long time, clutching Devin against my chest while the officers moved around us, speaking in low, urgent voices. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth. Somewhere behind me, Wallace leaned against a patrol car, holding a gauze pad to the side of his head. When the sergeant approached, his voice was steady but soft. "Ma'am, you and the boy should come with us to the hospital. We need to make sure you're both all right." I nodded mechanically. My mind felt detached, floating somewhere above all this chaos. Devin was still trembling in my arms, his small fingers gripping my sleeve like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered. "You did everything right." As we sat inside the ambulance, a paramedic examined Devin's scrapes and bruises while another checked my blood pressure. I could hear Wallace arguing outside, refusing treatment until he knew we were both safe. Even in this moment, that old man's loyalty was unwavering. The sergeant joined us after a few minutes, crouching near the open door. "She'll be taken into custody and charged immediately," he said carefully. "There's enough evidence for multiple felonies: attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit fraud. The accomplice, Marcus Sellers, has already confessed most of it." My throat tightened. "He confessed?" "Yes," the sergeant said. "He claims Candace promised him a share of your life insurance once it was processed. He said she planned the whole thing to look like an accidental gas leak. Everything your grandson told you was true." I closed my eyes, the words sinking into me like ice. Hearing it confirmed didn't bring relief. It brought sorrow. My daughter, the child I raised, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, had turned my home into a death trap. Devin tugged gently at my sleeve. "Is Mama going to jail?" I hesitated. "She's going somewhere safe for now, where she can't hurt anyone. The police need to talk to her." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine. "She wasn't the same, Grandma." When she looked at me, it didn't feel like her anymore. Tears stung my eyes. I know, my love. Sometimes pain changes people so much that you can't recognize them anymore. The paramedic finished and gave me a reassuring nod. He's physically fine, just exhausted. You both need rest. But rest felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Candace's face, her trembling hand, her hollow eyes, that final look before the officers took her away. At the precinct, the night bled into morning. The room where they took our statements smelled faintly of old coffee and paperwork. Devin sat beside me, wrapped in a blanket that swallowed his small frame. Wallace was in the corner, a silent guardian, his weathered face drawn with fatigue. The sergeant returned after several hours carrying a folder. We've officially booked her, he said quietly. She'll be moved to county holding until her arraignment. Her accomplice is cooperating fully. There's no doubt about her involvement. I pressed my fingers against my temple. Can I see her? He looked at me uncertain. Are you sure that's a good idea? I just need a minute, I said. For closure. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. All right, she's calm now. You can speak to her briefly, but I'll have an officer present. I turned to Devin. Stay here with Wallace, sweetheart. I'll be right back. He bit his lip. Is she still mad? I don't know, I said truthfully, but whatever happens, I'll be fine. When they led me into the small holding room, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Candace sat on a bench, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, pale, her hair disheveled. For a long moment, she didn't even look at me. Candace, I said softly. Her eyes lifted, dull and tired. You shouldn't be here, she muttered. I needed to see you, I replied. I needed to understand why. She gave a bitter laugh. You already know why. You've always known. You made me into this. I shook my head. I tried to give you everything. No, she said sharply, her voice cracking. You gave me control, not love. Every decision, every word had to go through you. Even after Dad died, you made me feel like a guest in my own life. Her words hit hard, but I didn't argue. There was truth in her pain, even if it was twisted by resentment. Maybe I didn't see how deeply you were hurting, I admitted quietly. Maybe I failed you in ways I'll never fully understand. But what you did, Candace, you nearly killed your own son. Her expression faltered. I didn't want to hurt him, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Marcus said it would be simple. Quick. Clean. Marcus lied, I said, stepping closer. He used you, and now he's already saving himself by giving you away. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, silent and hot. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said softly. But you can start by facing what you've done. That's the only way to stop it from destroying what's left. For the first time in years, she looked at me with something almost human, regret, maybe even understanding. He's safe, right, Devin? Yes, I said. He's with me. Candace nodded slowly, her eyes closing as tears continued to fall. Good, she murmured. You were always the better mother. The officer gently touched my shoulder, signaling the time was up. I gave her one last look. Goodbye, Candace. I hope one day you find peace. When I stepped out of the room, the air felt heavier, not lighter, the kind of weight that only a mother carries after watching her child break beyond repair. Back in the waiting area, Devin rushed to me. Did she say anything? He asked. I knelt down to his level. She asked about you, I said softly. She wanted to know if you're safe. He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. then maybe she still loves us, even if she forgot how. That night, we were placed under protective care until the investigation settled. Wallace stayed with us, refusing to leave. The world outside went on, unaware of the storm that had torn through our lives. When I finally lay down to rest, Devin curled up beside me, clutching my hand. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, the parking lot, the gas station, the confrontation, and finally the arrest. It felt unreal, but the quiet warmth of my grandson's hand reminded me that we had survived. The following days blurred together as if time itself was afraid to move forward. The house where we once lived became a crime scene, yellow tape fluttering in the cold wind like a warning from fate. Devin and I were temporarily settled in Wallace's small apartment, tucked behind the building where he worked. It was cramped, but it felt like safety. For the first time in a long while, safety meant everything. Each morning, I woke before dawn, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The city outside was beginning to stir, but inside those walls everything was hushed. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, filled with thoughts I didn't dare say aloud. Devin slept fitfully, often waking from dreams that left him trembling. He would climb into my bed and I would hold him until his heartbeat slowed. There were moments when he'd look at me, his eyes far away, and whisper, "She didn't mean to, Grandma. I think Mama was sick." And every time he said it, something inside me cracked a little more. Because he was right. Candace wasn't evil. She was broken, consumed by greed and grief that had been left to rot in silence. The police finished their questioning within a few days. The evidence we had gathered, the photographs, Marcus's confession, Devin's testimony, had painted a clear picture. Candace was officially charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and insurance fraud. The sergeant handled everything with kindness, often checking in on us even after his official duties were done. "Your grandson is brave," he said one afternoon as he stopped by the apartment. "He's the reason both of you are alive. We've arranged for a child counselor to work with him starting next week." I nodded gratefully. "He's been through more than a child ever should," the sergeant sighed. "And you've been through enough for a lifetime, ma'am. But you did everything right." When he left, I turned to find Devin sitting quietly at the table, sketching something with a pencil Wallace had given him. It was a picture of a house by the lake, the Riverwood house, but in his drawing, the windows were dark and the trees leaned away from it like they were afraid. "That's where Mama took me," he said without looking up. It was quiet there. Too quiet. I sat beside him, resting a hand on his back. "We don't have to go back there again, my love. Ever." He nodded slowly. "Can we have a house with big windows? One where the light comes in?" I smiled through the ache in my chest. "Yes, we'll find one like that." Days passed and the rhythm of normal life began to return, even if it felt like a fragile illusion. Wallace, ever the steady presence, took care of the small things, buying groceries, fixing a flickering light, making sure we ate. His quiet strength was the pillar that held me up when I wanted to collapse. One evening, as Devin was getting ready for bed, I found him standing by the window, staring at the stars. "Grandma," he said softly, "do you think Mama can see us from where she is?" I paused. "Maybe," I said gently. "Maybe she's thinking about us too." He turned to me, his eyes wide and searching. "Do you think she's sorry?" My throat tightened. "I think she wishes things were different," I said after a long silence. "And that's another kind of sorry." Devin nodded thoughtfully, then climbed into bed. I tucked him in and watched as his eyes slowly closed, his breathing evening out. For the first time in weeks, he slept without trembling. When I stepped into the kitchen, Wallace was sitting at the table, sipping tea. He looked up and said quietly, "That boy's stronger than most grown men I've known." I smiled faintly. "He has his grandfather's courage." Wallace hesitated before speaking again. "Have you thought about what comes next? The trial, the house, everything?" I looked down at my hands, folded tightly in my lap. "I don't know. I only know we can't live surrounded by ghosts. We need to start fresh somewhere new." He nodded in understanding. You'll manage it. You always do. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark thinking about Candace. I replayed every stage of her life. The laughter, the teenage arguments, the pride in her eyes when she got her first job. How had all of that turned into this? I had lost my daughter long before the police took her away. I just hadn't realized it. But I also thought of Devin, his courage, his love, his capacity to forgive even what shouldn't be forgiven. That boy had saved us, not just from danger, but from despair. The next morning, we visited the counselor assigned to Devin. Her office was warm and full of sunlight. She spoke gently, explaining how they would talk about feelings, dreams, and fears, and how he could draw or write instead of using words when it was hard to speak. Devin listened carefully and then asked her one question that broke my heart and healed it all at once. Can I still love Mama? Even if she hurt us? The counselor smiled softly. Yes, Devin, you can love her, but from a safe place in your heart. That's what healing means. When we left, Devin held my hand a little tighter. I realized then that he wasn't just surviving. He was learning how to grow again, even after the darkness. That evening, while we ate dinner, Devin said suddenly, Grandma, I want to help other kids who are scared like me someday. I felt tears welling up. You already are, sweetheart. You already are. We finished our meal quietly, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace, fragile but real. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the window, and for the first time since that terrible night, I allowed myself to believe that there was still beauty left in the world. The morning began like any other. The smell of toast filled Wallace's small kitchen, and Devin was humming quietly as he arranged his school books on the table. The sun was streaming in through the window, soft and warm, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt ordinary. Peaceful, even. Then the knock came. It was a postal worker holding a small envelope. Delivery for Mrs. Binham, he said politely, handing it over before walking away. The envelope was plain, unmarked except for my name written in familiar, careful handwriting, Candace's handwriting. The air seemed to drain from the room. My fingers trembled as I turned it over. Wallace looked up immediately from his newspaper, his eyes narrowing. Is that from who I think it is? I nodded. It's postmarked from the detention center. Devin, who had been buttering his toast, froze mid-motion. His eyes darted from me to the envelope. It's from Mama, isn't it? I hesitated, unsure what to say. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered. It looks like it. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked away. You can read it first. Wallace rose slowly, pouring himself another cup of tea. You sure you're ready for that? I wasn't sure of anything, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. The past few weeks had been about healing, rebuilding some sense of normal life. But this letter felt like a door opening back into a room I had locked and tried to forget. I took a deep breath and opened it carefully. The paper was thin, lined, written in blue ink. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, steady, neat, almost emotionless at first glance. Mama, it began. I don't know if you'll even read this, but I need to try. I've been in here for 3 weeks now, and the noise in my head is louder than the noise in this place. The doctors keep asking me why I did what I did, but I don't have one answer. It wasn't just money. It wasn't even hate. It was something colder. Something that made me stop seeing you and Devin as real people. I think I stopped seeing myself too. My throat tightened as I read on. They tell me that I might get help here, that I can see a therapist who deals with personality disorders. I didn't even know that was what they called it. I just thought I was angry. But now I realize I've been angry for most of my life. Angry at Dad for dying. Angry at you for surviving. Angry at myself for being ordinary when I thought I was meant for more. The words blurred for a moment as my eyes filled with tears. I could almost hear her voice as I read. I remember when I was little and you used to make pancakes on Sundays. You'd hum old songs and I'd sit on the counter watching. I used to think that was what happiness looked like. Somewhere along the way, I lost it. I don't know if it's too late to find it again. Maybe it is. I paused, pressing the letter to my chest for a moment. Wallace's voice was soft behind me. You don't have to read the rest if it hurts, but I had to. Tell Devin that I'm sorry. Tell him I see his face every night when I close my eyes. I didn't want to hurt him, Mama. I swear I didn't. I wanted to end my pain, but I didn't know how. Marcus made me believe there was no way out. I let him speak to the worst parts of me. Now I have to live with that forever. The letter ended with shaky handwriting. If forgiveness is too much to ask, then I'll settle for knowing you're alive. Maybe one day, if Devin wants to see me, I'll be better. Until then, I'll be here, trying to find whatever's left of me. Candace. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the faint ticking of Wallace's clock. Devin looked at me with cautious eyes. Can I read it? I hesitated. It's a lot for you, sweetheart. He nodded, his voice quiet but steady. I need to know what she said. I handed it to him, watching as his small fingers unfolded the paper. He read in silence, his lips moving slightly as he followed the words. When he finished, he didn't cry. He just looked very still. She said she's sorry, he whispered after a long pause. Yes, I said softly. She did. He folded it again, much like I had, and placed it back on the table. Do you believe her? I took a deep breath. I believe she's trying. That's all I can ask for right now. Devin nodded, thoughtful beyond his years. Then maybe we should keep it. Not to remember the bad things, but to remember what we survived. Wallace smiled faintly from the corner. That boy's got wisdom beyond his age. The rest of the day passed quietly. Devin went back to his drawing, this time sketching a sunrise over a house with big windows, the kind he said he wanted. Wallace repaired a squeaky chair, humming an old tune. And I sat there staring at that folded letter, feeling both the ache of loss and the strange calm of closure. Later that evening, I tucked Devin into bed. He looked peaceful, though thoughtful. Grandma, he said sleepily, do you think Mama can really change? I smoothed his hair. I think people can always change, but sometimes it takes losing everything to start again. He nodded slowly, eyes fluttering shut. Then I hope she finds her way. When I returned to the kitchen, Wallace was cleaning up. The letter was still on the table, catching the soft light from the lamp. I picked it up one last time and placed it inside a small box where I kept family photographs, the good ones from before everything broke. I'm not keeping it for forgiveness, I murmured, half to myself. I'm keeping it to remember that even the darkest hearts can still search for light. Wallace gave a slow nod. You've got a good heart, Mara. That's what saved that boy. And maybe one day it'll save her too. That night, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, I realized something important. The pain would never fully disappear, but it no longer ruled me. Candace's letter hadn't reopened the wound. It had shown me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning how to live with the scars and still choose love over bitterness. The morning of the hearing came sooner than I was ready for. The official envelope from the courthouse had arrived days earlier, neat and impersonal, but its message was heavy. The state of Georgia versus Candace Binham, sentencing hearing. Victim statement optional. Those last two words, victim statement, sat in my chest like stones. Wallace insisted on driving us. Devin wanted to come, but I said no. You've already lived enough of this story, I told him gently. You deserve a day at school, a day to be a child. He didn't argue. He only hugged me tighter than usual that morning and whispered, "Tell Mama I still remember the pancakes." The courthouse steps gleamed in the sunlight. Reporters lingered at the edges like vultures waiting for movement, cameras hanging from their necks. I kept my head down and walked past them, one hand gripping my cane and the other clenching my statement folded neatly in my pocket. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood and old paper. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, almost intimate, and somehow that made it harder. Candace was already seated beside her attorney, wrists cuffed, wearing a pale gray prison uniform. Her hair had been cut short, and she looked older, almost fragile. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. His voice was firm, but even as he read the list of charges, attempted murder, conspiracy, kidnapping, insurance fraud, each word was a dagger of reality, a reminder of what she had done. Candace listened quietly, her face calm, but her hands trembled in her lap. When the judge called my name to give the victim's statement, I rose slowly. Every eye in the room seemed to follow me. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. Wallace gave me a reassuring nod from the back row. I stood before the bench and unfolded my paper. The words I had written so many times had blurred together, but I spoke from the heart. "Your Honor," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "I stand here not only as a victim, but as a mother. My daughter tried to take my life and my grandson's life. I have replayed that truth in my mind every day since, trying to understand how love can turn into something so cold." Candace lowered her eyes. "I'm not here for revenge," I continued. "I'm here for truth. Because the truth is, what she did nearly destroyed 3 generations of our family. My husband's memory, my daughter's humanity, my grandson's innocence, they were all dragged into this darkness. And yet, we are still standing." I paused, steadying my breath. "My grandson is 7 years old, and he saved us all. He carries scars no child should bear. But he also carries a light stronger than anything I've ever seen. I can't let that light be dimmed by bitterness." I looked directly at Candace. "You wrote that you're sorry. I believe you are in your way. I forgive you, not to free you from your punishment, but to free myself from the weight of hate. I hope you find peace in whatever time you spend behind those walls. And I hope someday, when Devin is grown, he can look at you and see not a monster, but a warning that love must be protected, not destroyed." The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even the judge took a moment before speaking. "Thank you, Mrs. Benham," he said quietly. "Your courage is noted." I returned to my seat, my legs trembling. Wallace placed a hand over mine. "You did right," he whispered. Then it was Candace's turn. Her lawyer guided her gently to the stand. She stood there for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't have an excuse," she said. "There isn't one. I don't even know how to begin making amends. I wake up every night hearing my son's voice, seeing my mother's face in that house. I thought money could fill what I'd lost, but it only made the emptiness louder. I'm sorry." She looked at me then, and for the first time since that terrible night, I saw something familiar in her eyes, not the madness or the rage, but a trace of the daughter I had once known. "Mom," she said softly, "tell Devin I love him. Tell him I remember the pancakes, too." The judge gave his ruling shortly after. Candace was sentenced to 25 years, with eligibility for parole after 15, contingent on continued psychiatric treatment. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed through my bones. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the air felt crisp and clean, the sky a bright, endless blue. I stood on the steps for a long time, letting the wind lift the tension from my shoulders. Wallace joined me quietly, holding out my coat. "It's done," he said simply. I nodded, watching a flock of birds pass overhead. "It's never really done," I murmured. "But maybe now we can start breathing again." That evening, I went home to Devin. He was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring a picture of a park, a woman and a boy flying a kite under the sun. When he saw me, he jumped up and hugged me tightly. "How was it?" he asked, looking up with those clear, wise eyes. "It was hard," I said honestly, kneeling to meet him. "But it's finished. Mama said she loves you," he smiled faintly. "Then maybe she's starting to get better." I brushed his hair back, marveling at how much strength could live in such a small heart. "Maybe she is." That night, after Devin fell asleep, I stepped onto the balcony and watched the city lights shimmer. Somewhere my daughter was beginning her long road toward redemption. And here, in this small apartment filled with quiet hope, a new life was already taking shape. The pain would always be there, but so would love. And love, even after betrayal, was enough to rebuild. It had been almost 6 months since the sentencing. Life had slowly settled into something that resembled normal. Devin was back in school, doing well in his classes, and even joined an art club where he spent hours sketching trees, houses, and lakes that looked far brighter than the one at Riverwood. Every morning began the same way. I'd walk him to the bus stop, watch him wave goodbye, and then head back home to prepare breakfast for when he returned. Wallace visited often, sometimes bringing flowers, sometimes groceries, always bringing peace. The nightmares had become rare. The laughter had become real again. Then, one afternoon, when I opened the mailbox, I found another letter. This one wasn't addressed to me. It was written in uneven, careful handwriting. To Devin Binham. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My fingers tightened around the envelope as if it might vanish. There was no return address, but I didn't need one. I recognized that handwriting anywhere. When Devin came home later that day, I placed the envelope gently on the table. His backpack slid from his shoulder, landing with a soft thud. "Is that from her?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said softly. "It's your letter." He stood there for a while staring at it like it might bite him. "Can I read it alone?" "Of course," I said, though my heart ached. "I'll be right here if you need me." He nodded, picked it up carefully, and went to his room. The door clicked shut behind him. Minutes stretched into an hour. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, the sound loud in the silence. I sat in the living room, twisting my wedding ring between my fingers. I had no idea what that letter said, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. All I could do was wait. Finally, the door opened. Devin stepped out, holding the letter loosely in his hand. His expression was calm but distant, like he was still somewhere else. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. He walked over and sat beside me. "She said she's learning how to be better," he began slowly. "She said the doctors help her remember good things now instead of bad ones. She wrote that she dreams of me at the park, and that she hopes one day I'll draw something for her." He paused, glancing down at the letter again. "She said she knows she can't undo what she did. But she also said she's proud of me. That I was brave when she wasn't." My throat tightened. "That's true," I whispered. Devin's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. "She ended it with something weird, though," he said. She said, "When you draw the lake again, draw the sun rising, not setting." I closed my eyes for a moment. "That's her way of saying she's trying to start over." He nodded, thinking deeply. "Can we write back to her?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect him, to build a wall between him and that darkness forever. But the other part of me knew that forgiveness wasn't about walls. It was about doors. And maybe this was his door. "If that's what you want," I said finally, "then yes, we can." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sorrow and strength. "I think I need to. Not because I miss her the way I used to, but because I want her to know I'm okay." We sat together at the kitchen table that evening, a blank sheet of paper before him. The lamp cast a soft golden glow over the page. Devin began to write, his small hand moving slowly but with certainty. "Dear Mama, I got your letter. Thank you for writing to me. I liked that you remember the park and the pancakes. I remember them too. I'm not scared anymore. I live with Grandma and I'm happy. I go to school and I draw a lot. My teacher says I'm good at it. I forgive you. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. I hope you feel better and listen to the doctors. Grandma says everyone can change if they really try. I think you can too. Maybe when I'm older I'll come see you. But not yet. I'll draw you the lake with the sunrise. Devin." When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and slid it into an envelope. His handwriting was uneven, just like hers had been. "Can we mail it tomorrow?" he asked, Yes, sweetheart, I said softly. We will. That night, as he slept, I stood by his doorway, watching him breathe peacefully. The glow of his nightlight painted soft halos across the walls. For the first time since that terrible night, I felt something that had been missing for months. Peace that didn't come from running or hiding or surviving, but from healing. The next morning, we mailed the letter. Devin slipped it into the box himself, standing on his toes to reach. When it disappeared inside, he smiled faintly. Do you think she'll write back? I think she will, I said, when she's ready. Weeks later, life continued its slow bloom. Devin's counselor said his progress was remarkable, that art was helping him express what words couldn't. Wallace often came by in the evenings, bringing laughter that filled the small apartment with life. Then one evening, as I watched Devin sketch by the window, I noticed the drawing he was working on. It was the lake again, but this time the sun was rising, its light stretching wide across the water. Beside the lake were two figures, a woman and a boy, holding hands, looking at the dawn. He noticed me watching and smiled shyly. That's us, he said. I finally drew it the way she said. My eyes stung with tears, but they were warm ones, not cold. It's beautiful, Devin, he nodded. It feels like starting over. Outside, the first light of evening faded, but inside, everything glowed softly. The shadows no longer frightened us. They only reminded us how far we'd come. That night before bed, Devin said quietly, Grandma, I think Mama's sunrise is happening too. Maybe somewhere far away she's drawing it too. I kissed his forehead. Maybe she is, my love. Maybe she finally found her morning. He smiled and closed his eyes, drifting into peaceful sleep. As I turned off the lamp, I realized something profound. The story that had begun with fear and betrayal had not ended with hatred. It had ended with understanding. Candace was no longer just the woman who tried to destroy us. She was a lesson, a reminder of what happens when love loses its way, and of how forgiveness can bring it back. We had walked through fire, Devin and I, and somehow emerged into the light together. The sunrise he drew wasn't just his, it was ours. 11 years passed quietly, marked not by fear but by growth. Devin was no longer the small boy clutching a dinosaur backpack. He was now a young man with thoughtful eyes and a calm strength that often reminded me of his grandfather. At 18, he was preparing to begin college with a scholarship in art and psychology. He said he wanted to understand people, to help children who carried invisible wounds. Our life had taken gentle shape. The city apartment had given way to a small house with big windows, the kind Devin once said he dreamed of. On most mornings, sunlight filled the rooms and the smell of paint or coffee hung in the air. Wallace had passed away a few years earlier, but his memory lived with us in every repaired chair and every warm cup of tea we shared in his name. Then one summer afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was stamped with the seal of the state correctional facility. Devin retrieved it from the mailbox before I did. I watched from the porch as he turned it over in his hands, reading the sender's name printed in small, neat letters. Candace Binham, he looked at me calmly. It's from her. My chest tightened. After all these years, I had learned that peace was fragile, a quiet garden easily disturbed by the past. Do you want me to open it first? I asked. He shook his head. I think I'm ready. He opened it slowly and read in silence. His face didn't change much, but I could see the thoughts passing through his eyes like shadows crossing water. When he finished, he folded it neatly and placed it on the table between us. She's being released next month, he said quietly. Early parole for good behavior and treatment progress. I nodded slowly. I see. She wants to see me. The words hung in the air like an echo that refused to fade. I felt a flicker of worry, an instinct older than reason. You don't have to, I said gently. You owe her nothing. I know, he replied. But I think I want to. I looked at him. This young man who had once been a frightened child whispering for me to believe him? There was no fear in his voice now, only steadiness. Why? I asked. He took a breath. Because I think forgiveness isn't real until you look someone in the eyes and say it. I forgave her in my letters, but I've never told her face to face. I want to close that door, not leave it half open. That night, I barely slept. My mind traveled backward through the years, to the night at the airport, the whispers in the dark, the terror of losing everything. Yet when I thought of Candace now, I didn't feel anger. I felt a deep sadness for the life she could have had, the mother she might have been. A week later, we drove to the correctional facility 2 towns over. The drive was quiet, broken only by the hum of the tires and the rhythmic beating of my heart. The fields along the road were golden with summer grass, swaying like waves. When we arrived, an officer led us through security. The visiting room was plain, white walls, bolted tables, and rows of metal chairs. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and something older, something tired. Candace was already seated when we entered. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her face lined but calm. She looked up as we approached, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Devin hesitated, then walked toward her. She stood slowly, her eyes brimming. "You grew up," she whispered. He nodded. I had to. They sat across from each other. I remained a few feet away, giving them the space they both needed. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick with everything that had gone unsaid. Finally, Candace spoke. "I've been in therapy for years now," she said softly. "At first, I hated it. I didn't want to face what I'd done. But over time, I started to understand how sick I was, how much of my anger was fear. Fear of failing, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough." Devin listened intently, his hands folded on the table. "You hurt us," he said quietly. "You almost killed us." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. There's no apology big enough for what I did." He took a deep breath. "When I was little, I used to dream that you'd come back and say it wasn't real, that the bad version of you was a dream. But I don't dream that anymore." She flinched slightly, then nodded. "I wouldn't if I were you. The bad version of me was real. I let her win for too long." Devin looked at her for a long time. "I forgive you," he said finally. "Not because I forget, but because I don't want to hate you anymore." Candace's shoulders shook. "You're stronger than I ever was," he smiled faintly. "You gave me life even if you almost took it away. I'm still grateful for the first part. That broke her." She covered her face with trembling hands, sobbing quietly. I turned my eyes away, giving them the privacy that moment deserved. When she finally calmed, Devin stood. "I have to go," he said softly. Candace rose as well. "Can I hug you?" He hesitated only a second before nodding. She stepped forward carefully, wrapping her arms around him. It was not the embrace of a mother reclaiming her son. It was one of repentance and release. When they parted, she looked at me. Our eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat, I saw her as she once was, a little girl running barefoot through the garden, laughing, her hair flying in the wind. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. I nodded. "Be well, Candace." We left the facility in silence. The drive home was quiet, the world outside glowing with the gold of early evening. Devin leaned his head against the window, watching the fields pass by. After a while, he said softly, "She looked peaceful, Grandma. Like she finally forgave herself, too." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what freedom really is." He nodded. "It felt like the end of a story." "No, my love," I said gently, glancing at him. "It felt like the beginning of yours." When we reached home, the house was bathed in sunset. Devin went straight to his desk and began to draw. I made tea and stood behind him, watching as the picture took form. A horizon, a road winding toward the light, and 3 figures this time. A boy, a woman, and another woman walking behind them, her outline fading softly into the glow. "That's us," he said quietly. "All of us." I placed a hand on his shoulder, pride and peace filling every corner of my heart. "It's beautiful," he smiled. "It's our sunrise." The light through the window turned golden, flooding the room. For the first time in years, there were no shadows left, only warmth, love, and the promise of tomorrow. And that was how our story truly ended. Not with tragedy or punishment, but with forgiveness, the kind that sets everyone free. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. This story isn't just about loss. It's about love surviving where it shouldn't. It's about listening, healing, and finding light in the darkest corners of the soul. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and remember, sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself. Love always. Arbinham and Devon.